Hi, everyone. It's Dr. Arlene Diamco, the multidimensional MD. Thank you so much for joining us again today. I have a very special guest for you, and this is Mr. Robert Poynter, also known as Bob. He is a holistic counselor, and he has joined the All Worlds Health team, and we are really so happy to have him because he really fits into my overarching mission of bringing the intuitive spirit back to medicine in practical and tangible ways so that we can access deeper healing and experience more peace, love, and joy in our everyday lives. So, as we get started, let me tell you a little bit more about him. He has been, while working from a mindfulness based cognitive theoretical orientation, Mr. Poynter, aka Bob, incorporates a variety of techniques and interventions that reflect the teachings and disciplines from Eastern and Western philosophies while meeting the individual wherever they are in the moment. His holistic approach involves the mind body connection, neuroscience, neurobiology, quantum mechanics, energy work, qigong, psychology, and how the mind and body are interrelated. He is trained and has experience with mindfulness-based stress response, breath work, neurobiology, heart-brain coherence, heart rate variability, guided imagery, cognitive behavioral therapy, polyvagal theory, energy clearing, self-compassion, and hypnotherapy. So that is a lot in a whole sentence. We're going to unpack some of that today. But first, we'd love to get to know you a little bit more, Bob. And can you tell us, how did you get interested in counseling and specifically like holistic counseling in the first place?
Oh, it's a great question, and it's a question that keeps like growing legs on it too as I kind of get more seasoned. First of all, I'd like to thank you for having me and just introducing me and being part of your team because it's also very humbling to find more holistic people that are as intentional as you are. So I appreciate you being there for me in this as well. How did I get into this? I think always as a kid, I was a little more of a probably a sensitive type, an empath type, and was always drawn to connection with people. And I think being able to feel and connect emotionally and energetically was something I was able to do very quickly with people. And that kind of evolved in time in life that I was always drawn to certain people and their emotions and maybe what they were processing, maybe their energy, and sometimes good, sometimes not so good all the time. So I was always kind of consciously aware of what was
Can I
happening.
ask you about that? Because I feel like people
Sure.
will, there's certain people that are also very empathic, sensitive, will identify with that. And so, can you describe a little bit more, like when you said, "Oh, when I was little, I felt like I was like that." What do you mean by that? What did you feel like? What did you pick up on? Like what was it like? Because not everyone actually knows that, or it's great to put it into words.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's almost like extracting the essence of someone's life story. It's almost being able to process information that somebody possesses without them having to tell me, without having to verbalize it. Basically, I could feel their emotion. I could tell what kind of energy maybe they've been imprinted with, or things that maybe they have. Picked up, or maybe something that has tainted them in some way. I could tell that maybe they were a little disconnected from their true kind of essence of who they're supposed to be, their divine essence. So it's a little bit of like finding this interference of energy when it's not really clear. It doesn't really fit, right? It's not really connected. And I could, I was finding when I was around certain people when it would connect, how harmonious it was, right? And everything
Mhm.
is great, everything's happy, everything's joyful. But now we're
Yeah,
not always
connecting,
in
you
that
mean like
state.
what it looks like and what you're feeling? Like if
Correct.
it's
Yeah.
congruent.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah. So
okay,
I could feel it
got
in
it.
my heart. I could feel it in my gut. I could feel it in my body. I could feel it in my neck. Right? I could feel it all over my body. So when things are loose and at ease, I feel like that person's also at ease. Right. So if they're not, then I can kind of sense these feelings of like something's off with this individual. So
Yeah,
yeah, I think through childhood, I was always kind of connected to those things and knowing when there's discomfort, or there's
mhm.
confrontations around like how that would affect me, and recognizing like these things are incongruent as far as what I would like it to be like. So
Yeah,
yeah. Yeah, so
that's
that's a great question. I mean, that's definitely part of a lot of the work that I do with people is helping them become a little more in tune to themselves, to
uh-huh.
become conscious of those cues, those symptoms, and how do we get clearer so that we can have more harmonious relationships. I think just like anybody else, I mean, I had my own traumas and losses and things that I experienced in life and in childhood. And at those times in teenage years, which can be quite tumultuous and a lot of things going on, hormonally,
Mhm.
and your brain's growing exponentially. How to process that information, and being highly sensitive already, taking in all this other information,
Mhm.
also dealing with my own kind of internal, stuff going on at the same time was probably a little overwhelming. I would
Mhm.
think, right? So I don't think I
Mhm.
was normally externalizing that to other people. I was probably internalizing that. That seemed to be my tendency at the time, even though I was excelling in school and sports and those things. Internally, I was dealing with this internal conflict, or this loss, this
Mhm.
feeling, and trying to find a deeper connection of how do I get into healing? What does that look like?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that kind of led into college and getting into, philosophy and getting into humanities and art. And I think I got into Eastern philosophy pretty deep at that time. I was into anthropology and archaeology, and I was trying to find these coordinates that were kind of, illuminating some kind of deeper meaning. I think going through trauma, you're going to
Mhm.
have at least for me, and I see it with my clients as well, people that have developed, have gone through some form of trauma, some kind of loss, something that, really had an impact on them. I find that these people, and for myself, that we're looking for deeper meaning in things. And maybe we already felt deep. Now we have a little more motivation to find more meaning in life in some way. So I think, my journey has been always to try to heal my own wounds in some way, of coming out the other side, creating separation from thoughts and emotions,
Mhm.
becoming a little more enlightened, want to be a little more conscious and aware. And college kind of started to steer me in that direction. And that just kind of piggybacked and on top of one thing to the next, where I was working with kids with autism for about 5 years, and being able to connect with those kids immediately. I already knew what they were trying to vocalize and verbalize. I could feel what they were going through. And so I would,
Mhm.
have these cues, and it was great training at the time. I think deep down, I knew I wasn't going to be a special ed teacher the rest of my life, but I was working on this skill, this craft. I was
Mhm.
honing it
Yeah.
and really becoming connected
Yeah,
to it.
they were
So
they were your
yeah,
teachers.
they were definitely
Yeah.
teaching. Yeah, a wonderful. I had
Yeah.
savants in my
Mhm.
class that were just they were brilliant. On some levels, right? And other levels,
Yeah.
they were
Sure.
socially missing something. But if I
Right.
could be the bridge, then I could teach them what they're trying to communicate.
And that's a
So
a great
yeah,
reminder for all of us, and also what you were going through, and finding meaning, deeper meaning in everyday life. That is so much of what we are all going through right now in a nutshell, because
absolutely.
there's so many things going on in the world, so many things going on for people personally, in the community, and then globally, and so, if we can all kinda get on that wavelength of what is the deeper meaning, how can we feel and experience and live in a way that's more conscious and has more meaning in our everyday lives, even if things feel really challenging and chaotic.
Right, right. No, I think that's 100% correct. I mean, we are in that environment, that climate right now, and I think that people are yearning for more meaning. And I think deep down, like you can be very successful in your career, how much money you make, or you travel the world, you've seen all these things, but something seems to be missing with most people that have those successes. It's this
Sure.
fulfillment, right? This self fulfillment, and we can look outward for that, and we find ourselves continuing those vices, or we can go inward and maybe tap into something that's a little more illuminating, a little more connecting, a little more
Mhm.
resonating, and all of a sudden it fills this space inside, right? And we want to occupy that space. We really want to occupy that consciousness, that state of consciousness. So I think going through my journeys of having to find healing and continuing in that world and evolving and growing, it's wonderful to find congruence and be able to do this personally, but also professionally, and guide people into a higher state of consciousness. So
Now I
yeah,
know
it's
that,
been it's a journey.
yeah, this is, so part of that journey for you and also what you guide your clients through has been through breath work.
Yeah.
So what does breath work mean to you, and how is something like breath work, breathing, beneficial for people?
It's a great question. I mean, I need
Besides the
an hour.
obvious.
I need an hour for this one, but I'll try to keep it short. I mean, the breath is. I mean, I think you're kind of saying it. I look at all of these different concepts of, these individual, sources of, if it's Eastern philosophy, if it's the vagus nerve, it's the neuroscience, the neurobiology, if it's the energy body, it's the heart brain coherence, it's the brain waves, right? Looking at all these independent sources, and then really developing this concept of consilience, of that they're all kind of moving into this same conclusion, the same result, right? So I really like to borrow that consilience and the synthesis of all these things. And breathwork seems to breathe all of it, right?
Mhm,
Breathwork is, I mean, it's oxygenating our brain in so many different ways. We detox ourselves, 70% through our breath. What our body no longer needs, we expel. And I think what it really plays into is this autonomic nervous system, and looking at two of the, major crucial components of that, your sympathetic and your parasympathetic nervous systems. And so, before the age of 13, most of us are, before the age of 13, kids are experiencing, lower brainwave activity, which is a theta and a delta state, some of the two slowest brain waves.
mhm,
And so we don't even build into, alpha to beta and even into gamma until later in life. And so really what happens in these lower brain waves during life is that we can experience traumas, we have conflicts, we see neglect, we have maybe an alcoholic parent, or there's been abandonment, or whatever those things are. They are now programmed into those theta waves and those delta waves that become very dominant until that child reaches about 13, 14, or 15. So it's like this undercurrent that's underneath.
mhm,
And so we kind of live life in this undercurrent until we can get below those other states of consciousness to really open that up and reprogram. That we're going to continue, that undercurrent's going to keep pulling us a certain way. Even in our 40s or
mhm,
50s or 60s, we think we can, put more engines on the boat and put more sails on the boat, and then we're going to try to go another direction. But we seem to kind of follow this undercurrent over time, right? So breathwork gives us this opportunity to alter the state of consciousness, to go from a conscious state, to slow the brain activity down. Because if we're in a beta state, we're in our sympathetic nervous system, it's a fight or flight response, shutting down our immune system, right? It's going to shorten our telomeres, and we can have another, segment on that down the way. But our chromosomes start to kind of shorten themselves in a way. It looks like illness, it looks like disease, right? It looks like chronic stress and
mhm,
anxiety, and that's a beta brainwave. And so I do a lot of work on going below the beta state to get into the alpha state. And the alpha state is going to be about 8 to 12 hertz. It's a calm, meditative, relaxed state. Your brain is more coherent at that time. And now you're inducing the parasympathetic nervous system, which is going to be the rest and digest, right? And our immune system thrives in this. And if we're in rest and digest, 90% of our serotonin is produced in our gut, right? And so if we're in a fight or flight response, the gut's not really at rest. It's not going to produce that. So a real antidepressant is to really get into an altered state of consciousness through breath work, to slow down, to allow the whole body to be at ease, to be in that homeostatic balance. We're going to be happier. We're going to feel better. We're going to be more content. And so, a lot of it's how do we engage these different states of consciousness to decrease inflammation in the body, to process our emotions a little clearer, to reach, heightened, levels of awareness in some way. So, breath work becomes a foundation. It becomes kind of the glue at the same time. It's the
mhm,
cohesiveness to bring all regions of the brain communicating together, which is really, coherence, but then also in the same amplitude. So it's like if you have this brain and we can get it to connect, and then it's in the same amplitude, Now the whole body is the cellular body is going to respond differently. Everything's in the same sequence of that, right? Same synchronicity of that. And so definitely going to feel clearer, going to feel lighter. And you're really kind of moving away from that beta state, which is a really heightened fight or flight response, which is only going to produce more and more of that. So wherever the attention goes is where the blood flows, is where the neurons grow. Whatever is firing together is wiring together over time. So we have to unwire those heightened, sympathetic, beta heightened, anxiety and stress responses. And we need to kind of rewire, reprogram into these calmer states where we have more access to our intuition, our wisdom, our deeper sense of self. So yeah, breath is, again, I could go on and on with this,
Yeah.
but it is definitely as a foundation, and it just really brings everything together as far as I think health and happiness.
Based on what you were saying, I had this image of just ocean waters and underneath some turbulent waters. And so the
Hmm.
breath work is actually helping you access those
Yes,
turbulent waters that are subconscious and maybe apparent or not so apparent, might be hidden or not so hidden, but you can
correct.
consciously access them with your breathing. And so then you're accessing subconscious, your physiology, your autonomic nervous system, and you're integrating that conscious and subconscious so that they're more harmonious or coherent, so that the ocean waves are more in sync with one another. What you see at the surface is also what's going on underneath the surface, and that's a beautiful way to live.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you want to stay on top of the surface, it's pretty choppy, right? It's pretty turbulent and a lot of thoughts and emotions on the surface of the ocean. And you try to hang out on the top, and it's a busy day. You might get seasick. You might get battered around a little bit. But if you sink down deeper
Yeah.
below, you might find something in yourself that you might be able to redirect
Right.
that. You might be
You
able to
just keep
change
going
that.
deeper, deep, and then you get really calm. So there might be layers that are turbulent. The surface may or may not be turbulent because some people
Sure.
hide their emotions and other people
Absolutely.
let let them
Yeah,
all be seen.
absolutely.
So, but that's a beautiful way to look at it, and to be able to access so much with something seemingly as simple as breath work, but I know there's a lot of nuances to it, and I'm
Yeah,
looking forward to hearing about that more, and everyone
absolutely.
that gets to see you will get to learn that as well.
Yeah, and
Now
there's hundreds of breath works out there, but there's certain ones for certain people that
mhm,
you got to be
not a one
careful the
right,
trends out there and what's out there. So to be
not a
trained
one
and
size fits all for sure.
that's right, that's right, that's right.
Yes, we'll put
Yeah.
that caveat in there for sure. I've seen that many times. Um, Now I wanna ask about, because I often look at the stuck point where people are stuck as this, like, where there's more healing. And so when I'm talking to patients, and I often talk about getting more comfortable with being able to look at that stuck point so that we can understand it and access the deeper healing. So
Sure.
working with various people, what do you see? Are there any trends that you see in terms of, like, what tends to hold people back, or what keeps people from processing?
Yeah, I think it's those are good questions because I think we all have experienced that in some way, and you have some people that might get a little more stuck than
Mhm,
others, and sometimes that's a theme for them. And I think that's going to play into again, I think what concepts that they picked up in their childhood, and maybe things they've learned maybe even through their own parents, right? Or
mhm,
where they might have, because I think we're on some level we become our environments, right? I mean, through signal transduction, I won't go through all that, but it's
mhm.
our environment shapes who we are. And a lot of
Right.
times we can either our environment has been really overwhelming, right? It
Yeah.
has been maybe it is kind of influenced the sympathetic nervous system to get active, and to a point where the vagus nerve, the 10th cranial nerve, is moved into this place of dorsal, and it really shuts down.
Mhm.
And when we get into this place of stuck, shut down, it's like we don't have any motivation to do anything else. So we quit what we're doing, or we isolate or withdraw from certain things. So that's really dealing with kind of the interface of the parasympathetic nervous system, the vagus nerve.
Mhm.
And I think, again, breath work, and there's certain exercises and techniques, and making sure someone's in a receptive state. Because if we're not receptive, then we're not really willing to move and shift and change. So I think change is really the name of the game. We got to change the frequency of where the
Mhm.
energy is at that time. Now that could be
Mhm.
mental energy, that could be physical, that could be emotional, it could be biochemical, be bioenergetic.
Mhm.
Those are the things that I really focus on as in my practice. And so it's really assessing what can we do to kind of just even a subtle shift to see if that person might be able to kind of see something in a different light, to see something
Mhm.
at a different angle, or maybe to allow certain parts of the brain to open up a little bit more. Right. I mean, if we think of everything being energy on some level, that we can change from the outside, change the energy, then it'll change the way we think, change the way we feel. Not everyone's always
Mhm.
open to that concept. So sometimes we can turn from the inside out. Right. So we
Mhm.
can go both ways. You know, some are more
Mhm.
effective than others. But I think it's depending on where somebody's at and what they're willing and receptive of doing. I think it
Mhm.
is making sure they are in an alpha state, that they
Mhm.
are more coherent, and they are coming in at a place of like recognizing, okay, I'm at this place now. What are my options? And we all
Mhm.
know that if there's only one option or two options, we're not always as healthy. But if we have infinite amount of options,
Mhm.
such as holistic health and alternative healing, that people now have a choice, and they become their placebo in making their choice of what they're going to achieve and who they're going to become. So I think once we really get the system to be more receptive, more open, then there's plenty of doors to open up. It's a matter for
Mhm.
that person to find the right door. Now, I might be the expert as you are, but really to say, hey, you need to do this time, this way, every time, might be, taking away what that person's wisdom is saying to them.
Mhm.
So I think a lot of it is it's recognizing that amygdala activity, which can be fight or flight response, and that sends the body into a system, kind of this process of shutting down. And we have to come down from the basement and come back up into this ventral state, this social alpha state where we want to engage again. So there's a little bit of toning and attunement that has to go on, I think, in that. So what keeps people from processing is I think, probably their tendencies to be chasing dopamine, or there's distractions that are happening over time that they've not really had the maybe the guidance of going inward, attuning to themselves a certain way. It could be humming, it could be chanting, it could be movement, it could be breath work, it could be just feeling sensations, it could be Tai Chi. There could be some way of attuning to ourselves in some way. And once we are able to attune to ourselves, then we seem to kind of get out of that state of being stuck. Now, it might
Uh-huh.
not last forever, but it's the practice of maintaining some of those practices to keep us moving in a direction. I hope
Okay.
that
That
fully answers your question.
Yeah, no, what from my understanding, that what tends to hold people back, often these issues from childhood, patterns that got set in long ago from their childhood, from their environment, and then, getting stuck in this physiological state that is either numbing, chasing what you said,
Mhm.
chasing dopamine, or distracting. Is
Sure.
keeping them, like, shut down or distracted in a way from looking at those childhood wounds and being able to, and so you're helping them shift even a small perspective, so instead of looking at a wound as something really stuck, that they're actually starting to see, like, doors opening, that there are choices too. And
Yeah.
many things can
Yeah.
help with those choices, and helping them attune to themselves helps that. So what you were saying, the breath work, the humming, the toning, those are various things that you teach people how to tune into their
Yeah.
own natural essence wavelengths
Yeah.
so they can, like,
Right.
hear themselves, feel themselves,
Yeah.
see themselves.
Absolutely. And I think through that attunement, it's kind of like the first step. I mean, can't really even process the information of memory consolidation and reconsolidate until we're in an attuned kind of state. We have to alter the state of consciousness in order to get below the surface. And now we can process, what was that in childhood? And What are you
Yeah.
holding on to? Where are you holding that? And why? What's the interpretation and all of that? And maybe in time, like, what can we do to let that go? What can we do to forgive that person, that thing? What do we can do to forgive yourself for holding on to it, and how it's affected you and how it's affected everybody else around you, or the people, how you processed it out loud or internally. So there's a lot of detaching at that point, right,
Yeah.
and really letting go at that point. But we have to, they have to do the first step. We have to kind of get clear and be in the moment. And once we're there, we now are kind of now the doors are all open.
Oh,
Yeah.
but it's so interesting, and anyone's life story is so interesting and beautiful, and be able to, like, look at it in various ways and see the deeper meaning of what they're are getting out of it, what they're able to learn and grow through it. It's so helpful. Now, um, is there anything that, because you're a holistic counselor, and counseling can be new to many people too, but so for both counseling and for holistic counseling, is there anything that people could do to help prepare for a session to get the most out of it?
Yeah, I think, obviously, being able to have a practice of, maybe if it's mindfulness and you're a little more conscious and reflective and introspective, and if not, you can learn to be more of, right? But I think that
Mhm,
those pieces will help to notice, like, things that might come up in your week or in the last couple weeks between appointments, or things that issues that might surface, that sometimes we just have these little memories of it, but we don't really do much about it. But if we write it down, maybe we journal it, we log it in some way, we have an insightful way of starting to kind of hold ourselves accountable of how frequent this thing is coming up, or this pattern
mhm,
is showing itself again, this relationship is showing itself again. That it gives us a theme to really work on. It gives us something to recognize, what's going on underneath it. And I think that once you become conscious of a certain theme, and we start getting in touch with, philosophy, and, philosophies you borrowed and are using, but what are you kind of moving into, and what you
mhm,
adopt and extract to kind of, define your own new philosophy in some way. It doesn't have to be entirely new, but I think it gets down into a value system and a virtue. And if our behaviors are not really aligned to something that we deeply value, then we're
mm,
kind of out of alignment, right? And we're going to
mhm,
feel discomfort, we're going to feel distress. So I think that we really start to kind of really focus on the intention, really manifesting the intention every season, to see it grow, to see it shift, to see it change. So, it doesn't have to necessarily, be like, oh, I don't have anything that I had anything bad come up this past week, or I don't have anything to talk about. There's always experiential practices of breath work and heart brain coherence and deeper
mhm,
meditative states to continue to enhance, and I think really condition the responses in the body, and even doing some energy work over time of learning to keep yourself at a heightened level, so that you don't find yourself a little weaker with the chi. We want our chi to be big and wide, and really being able to kind
mhm.
of, protect ourselves from other things. So, I don't think that we need to over prepare. I
Sure.
think that sometimes it's kind of like what your body's coming in with. And I think sometimes there are things that we're like, hey, this thing has been, I want to confront this. I want to be able to explore this. And it's always interesting. I could try to have a script of what I want to do with that person that day, and they come in with something, and it takes a whole different change, right?
Mhm,
I mean, so as long as you're very transparent and open, I think some of your more intuitive and holistic clinicians are going to kind of sense that something is going on. um, and I think that that really helps, because it becomes a collaborative approach of sharing these
mhm.
things. But I also find that it's really good to prepare by doing a little deep breathing before a session, and kind of get yourself there a little early to get clear, so that you're
Mm.
not running from one thing to the next and taking 15-20 minutes to get underneath it. That maybe
Yeah,
you could do a little work beforehand that actually helps you to get underneath it a little bit more.
okay. So those are some, so for people that would like to be more reflective when they come in, they could start journaling,
Yeah.
or they could also just take a moment and do a little bit of breath work. Maybe arrive early or sit in the
Yes.
car or do it at home before they come. Just even minutes.
Yes.
If they are, would like to be even like more reflective, to identify any of those incongruencies with how they're feeling and their virtues that they hold true for themselves, and being able to talk about those and
Yeah,
flush
that's
those out.
great. And on the other side of that is also to reflect and to acknowledge, I call it like the insightful journaling or like the intuitive journaling of the things that you notice, the changes that are being made. And it's not necessarily just to celebrate them, it's to expand them, it's to extend them.
I
It's
like
to
that.
keep bringing that in because we're trying to, you know, you're trying to unprogram this old self that's underneath. And we're trying to also reprogram this new self. We're trying to do this simultaneously. So it's just as important to let go of the old and the stuff that we don't want, but we don't want to focus just on that because we want our brain, our energy to start focusing on the things we want to see more of at the same time, because then we're going to start having more of that experience.
That's great. So that takes it even a step further. How can you get the most out of the session after the session too? Is the insightful journaling and
There you
expand
go.
on the process.
Yeah.
So love it.
True manifestation of that. Yeah, absolutely.
Now, I did want to ask something specifically about any suggestions you have for males, because stereotypically, we in our culture, we tend to think about women as more in touch with their emotions, but that's not true for everyone. It
True.
can be a stereotype, but it's not true for the necessarily the individual. And then you had talked about growing up that you could feel emotions very easily. So for males and especially males that feel like more empathic, are there any general suggestions that you would have for them?
Yeah, well, I think, and like you're saying, stereotypical. I think that I mean, Brene Brown did a lot of research on women in her first part of her career, then eventually did more on men, and really showed that obviously women are more nurturing and more patient and more caring, and men are definitely a little more angry and violent and aggressive and territorial. But I think men are also have had to, due to society and the norms and the influences, have had to be the breadwinners at times, and have had to be these warriors, and have had to not show weakness, because maybe it wasn't really received well in their families or the generations before them, or the ancestors didn't really talk about it. um, so I think it's really interesting that we've had to kind of shoulder through things as men, and we're not as vulnerable, we're not as open, we're not as receptive to the feedback, maybe because we don't want to disappoint anybody, and if my family sees me weak, I could easily perceive it as I'm not the head of the house, I'm not the man of the
Mhm,
house anymore, I'm not as strong as what I thought I was, and now they're not going to look up to me in that way. And I think that's a misconception. And I think we got to realize strength is also being able to be open, being okay to be scared and
mhm.
unsure,
And
and
things are
being
also
confused.
changing, in
Yeah,
our society. Like, it's like those
absolutely.
were the stereotypical roles,
Yeah,
but now it's much
it's
different. I
evolving
think.
so much.
Yeah.
And I think the younger generations are helping, the older generations to kind of open their mind a little bit and be open and accepting of some of those. So it's the kids, that are saying, "Mom, Dad, I feel this way, and you can't talk to me like this anymore. Like, you have to start to see it through this lens, and if not,
Mhm,
you're not going to have connection." So I think that it is becoming a little more normal for men to recognize when they're feeling a little low and feeling confused or lost a little bit, and
mhm,
maybe overwhelmed and stressed and fatigued. And I think that this is an awesome opportunity for men in this society and this time now, is to go inward and attune to that deeper part of themselves, to access their own wisdom, obviously, to be maybe better workers, right? Maybe to be a better person to themselves, maybe even deeper, that they can be a better husband, and be better family members, and maybe a better father if they're doing deeper work on themselves, clearing out those emotional, toxic, things that create inflammation and disease. If we definitely want to be here longer and happier, it's probably best if we process some of this in a healthy way. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I would be curious to know in Brené Brown's work if men access their deeper selves, if they found them to also be more nurturing.
Yeah, yeah.
And
I mean,
I know I
we
feel
have
that's
it. We
true.
have it in us. We have it in us. It's just a matter of, again, if it's not something we experienced in our own fathers or grandfathers, it's never too late to like access that. It's neuroplasticity, right? We can learn anything as long as we engage in it and we practice it and we evolve ourselves to be more nurturing, more loving. But it also starts with doing it with ourselves, right? And
Yes.
if we do it with ourselves, then we have little more bandwidth to do it for others, and then we're more receptive to feeling it and acknowledging it when somebody's doing it for us.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Nurturing all parts of the self.
absolutely. Yeah, and I've seen a lot of men in my practice over the years, and it's I see women too, and in kids and all ages, but it's very fascinating to see men coming in at 12 and 13 and some at in their 70s, and seeing that whole connection of them being really safe in an environment that feels open and receptive for them to really express themselves in the best way they can. And sometimes they stumble, they don't know exactly where to go and how that's going to come out, and that's okay. You don't have to be perfect. This isn't the place to be
Mhm.
perfect. We'll practice techniques to be a little bit better in time, but it is very humbling to see how many men are actually coming in and acknowledging some of their things and really
Yeah.
putting their heart in it and doing their work. And it's really fascinating to watch.
And then if we think about the yin yang symbol,
Yeah.
that black and white symbol with the 2 fishes chasing each other, but it has in the white part a black dot in it, and in the white part a black dot in it. So the masculine, the feminine energies, they
Hmm.
can't actually be completely separated because they are a part of one another, ever
Yeah,
changing, and I think that is also something good for everyone to remember, male,
absolutely. Even when
female,
you're
and women.
feeling, yeah, you're 100% right. Even if you're feeling really strong and stressed and active and alert, and it's summertime, it's a young season and a young month, that we need to have a little bit of yin in there, right? We need to have a little
Mhm.
softness and a little bit of breath and a little bit of nurture and nourishment. And maybe we're in the winter and it's a yin season, and maybe we're feeling the nights are longer and we're sleeping more. We still need a little bit of yang, still need a little fire, still need a little bit of that activity. And so their concept in Taoist philosophy is called wu wei, which is
Mhm.
kind of like putting in the minimal amount of effort to get the maximum result.
Mm,
So it's kind of
I
like
like that.
if the pendulum is going from yin to yang, that right in the middle is where we're supposed to be. And if we could maintain that, we definitely would be enlightened, right? That would be the goal. But it is nice to have that balance for sure. Yeah.
That sounds like great engineering to me.
Absolutely.
Um, what is your overall vision for holistic counseling? Because, there are not that many holistic counselors, and I'm fortunate that I do know a handful, and they're so great to work with.
Yeah.
But what is your vision for that? Um, and how can we expand this in the field of counseling?
Yeah. I think they're not teaching this in grad school so much. I
Mm,
mean, there are some specific schools that are out there that are, this East and West and trying to
mhm,
incorporate, and all these accredited, universities aren't always teaching this. So
mhm,
this is usually the intuitives that are kind of finding their own training,
mm,
and grad school is a platform to get in, and all of a sudden you're following your heart to chase and find and seek these modalities that can kind of instill a deeper connection to clients and their families. So I think it's really treating the whole person. It's treating, not, they call this mental health. It's so much more than mental health.
mm, mm,
That's one
for
piece of
sure,
the pie.
yeah,
We have to get this physical health. We have to really look at, the diet, the sleep, and, the mental health and the cognitions and the type of work, things they're talking about, the emotional work, which is, dealing with hormones and stress responses. We got to slow that stuff down and activate it in a healthy way. The biochemistry and getting those enzymes and everything to communicate better in the body, and the bioenergetic body. And to get that to be clear. And if we can get all these, bodies and different parts of ourselves to be a little more aligned, then we're definitely going to be feeling a certain way. So it's a mix of experiential therapy, holistic practices, not so much esoteric. I mean, I borrow from, those practices. I don't impose those beliefs onto anybody. We adopt the things that are working, right? It's that consilience again. We're trying to get to the same place. We're trying to be happy and healthy. And if we're healthy, we're happy, right? So what do
Mhm.
we need to do what does it matter what we need and use at that time to get us there? A lot of heart-centered work. I think really it's changing the frequency of your brain waves. It's increasing the heart brain coherence. It's activating the energy body. It's
Mhm.
clearing the energy body and expanding it inside. And I think you're really starting to discover themes about yourself, the archetypes, the things that keep kind of popping up and showing up, that we develop ways to clear those old patterns and programs and reprogram a whole new way. So I find it very natural. It's this natural way of starting to feel cleaner and better,
Mhm.
and you're in control. You're in more
Sure.
control of where it's going.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. The field was never meant to be isolated. The mind
I
was
know.
never meant to be isolated, so that collaboration that you're talking about, an interdisciplinary bringing in knowledge, wisdom, experience from other fields and integrating that is, like I said, efficiency, great engineering.
Yeah, and the last thing I'd say is I think when people start taking a journey inward and they really start to discover things about themselves that maybe they already knew, maybe they just didn't give it enough time, and all of a sudden that voice is a little louder, that intuition, that wisdom, that knowledge. There's a tap into a spirit that happens. There's something spiritual. There's an awakening. Maybe there's a deepening of that people start kind of being in a little more harmonious relationship with nature. Signs start to kind of, cues in life start to point in certain directions. It's just very interesting to watch people. Is I have my own journey, and it's not really
Uh-huh.
about that so much, but watching people starting to bring these things up, say, well, call me crazy. I'm like, no, you're starting to get in tuned. And now the path is illuminated for you a little bit more, and you're just now noticing it. And it's been there the whole time. So
Yeah.
it's pretty fascinating when people discover all these things coming together. And I think that's what holistic counseling can really do for people.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
become attuned to their intuitive nature.
There you go. It's a good title for a book.
Well, thank you so much for being here. It was just a great conversation. We wanna keep the dialogue going, and I hope that anyone listening or watching was able to get something out of this and know that this field of counseling is so rich, and there's more and more coming in through the holistic side and being able to incorporate so many things. We covered a lot of territory today about just what it means to be empathic and how that can guide you in certain ways, what breath work can do for you, how to use that to help you, what might tend to hold you back, and how to look at that to address that to get more out of processing things, how to help you process things, how you can prepare for a counseling session if you would like to, and how to get the most out of counseling session even afterwards, and how men can to look at their own journey in various ways, and then also how we can continue to expand on this field of holistic counseling. And if anyone would like to get in touch with Mr. Robert Poynter, Bob here, you can on our website, allworldshealth.com. Just click on holistic counseling. And Bob, you also have your own website, which is
That's right. It's pointercounseling.com.
pointercounseling.com. And if you would like to connect with me further, you can on Instagram at All Worlds Health, Facebook, All Worlds Health and Pediatrics. And you can always sign up for my e-love letters. I send them out on Wednesdays, and that's on my website, allworldshealth.com. So remember, we believe in you, and we hope that you believe in you too. Lots of love to all of you. Take care.